Hey, what's up everyone? This is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. In this video, we're going to cover some music production tips while recreating Marshmello's Happier. So let's dive right in. Now, the overall goal of these videos that I create are not necessarily to dial in the exact patch or to know the exact preset that the person is using on the reference record, but more so to develop the ear training and understanding how to get near the general ballpark of that sound that we're listening to. And I think that's far more valuable than just saying, here's the patch, here's the preset, because you're not really understanding the why behind or the how behind creating that type of sound. And so that's what I'm going to be focusing in on throughout this video. So let's go ahead and focus on the drum pattern. So here are the drums that we're using for this remake. So I'm going to open up the drum rack so you can see the balance and just double click one of the instruments. So these sounds that I'm using within this drum rack can be located in a sample pack that I've put together. And you can simply just click the link below in the description box to download this sample pack. It's filled with one-shots, kicks, snares, hi-hats, construction kits, loops, and they're all 100% royalty-free, and they're WAV files that you can add in any DAW that you're currently using. So feel free to go ahead and use these sounds in your projects today. Just click the link below in the description box to download that. So we have the drum rack loaded with these sounds. And next, what we're going to go ahead and do is just load a Ableton Live 10 drum bus at the end of the overall drum rack, just to give it some nice drive, crunch, and to bring up the transients. Now that we have the drums in place, let's focus our attention on the main riff we hear in the choruses. Now, when I focus my attention on the synth going on in this chorus, my mind immediately gravitates to some kind of horn or brassy type of texture to the synth. It has this trumpety type of vibe, even though I can hear that there's a lot going on synth-wise. And so that's in my mind. So immediately, since I'm thinking open, or trumpety, or bright, I'm immediately narrowing it down to a specific waveform out of the 4 basic waveforms that we can choose from: the sine, the triangle, the square, and the saw. So I'm going to lean more towards the saw. And the reason why is the saw tends to be a lot more brighter of a tone. So we're going to start there and see how we can layer multiple wave tables and waveforms to kind of create the same type of vibe and feel that we hear in the chorus. So I'm going to start by using Ableton Live's Wavetable instrument. I'm going to click, drag, and drop that into a MIDI track, and let's go ahead and check out the riff. Now, as we can see, by default, the wavetable starts at a sine wave, which is that dark tone that we mentioned earlier. So we want more of a brighter tone. So we're going to go from the sine, move past the triangle, and head over to the sawtooth. So here's the sawtooth, and we should get a more brighter open tone. So now, just by messing around with some of the parameters here, let's see if we can kind of narrow and shape this to the tone that we like. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I switch from polyphonic here to monophonic. And what we're going to do after that is simply just shape the actual envelope a little bit. And what I mean by the envelope is the actual character of the tone. So if we went over here to the amp envelope, and if I move the attack all the way to the right, it's going to swell up. And the slope that we see here visually is the character of the tone. So we might want to use the filter frequency to take a little bit off the high end and then raise up the resonance a little bit. And I'm going to assign the second envelope to the filter frequency. And the reason for that is that's also going to help shape the tone. So in the wavetable, you can head over to the matrix and just touch any parameter and then assign that parameter to an envelope or an LFO. So filter 1 frequency, I'm going to go ahead and use and map that over to envelope 2. Going back to the source of the mod, we go to envelope 2, and now we can kind of shape that tone. So that helps with the shaping of that. And then what we can do is inside the basic shape itself, the wavetable, there is some modulation that we can actually apply to this. So I'm going to head over to modern, and I'm just going to warp the actual waveform. You can see visually what it's actually doing. So let's see what effect this actually gives to the sawtooth. So even by warping that sawtooth, we're starting to hear some change in the actual texture of the sound. You can fold it as well. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to transpose this an octave higher. So we go to semitones and put in 12. So we go a whole octave higher. And then we're going to add some saturation. Now here's the reason why I'm adding some saturation. This is going to add some harmonics to the waveform. And if you're thinking harmonics, what are you talking about? Well, saturating it and adding some distortion would really help some of the other harmonic attributes in this waveform itself just become more evident. And then we can also apply another filter here to take off some of that low end here and boost up some of the resonance. Now, immediately what will help create some create the vibe is coming over here to the unison, and we're gonna go and choose the shimmer, and I'm gonna set this maybe to 6 voices and see what that gives us. Now immediately by adding some of that unison, which is kind of detuning and adding some of that chorusy effect to the waveform itself, we start to feel more in line with that trumpet or that bright sound that we're looking at. So I'm going to go back to the envelope, and this is just a process of tweaking and tweaking, applying, just kind of always going back and forth. And as you change one parameter, you want to go back and change another parameter because they are all integrated to one another. So maybe boosting up the amount of the shimmer that we're using, and then going back to the envelope and shaping that tone. So that could be really useful. Now we could layer this sawtooth with another layer, an oscillator 2. And instead of using the basic wavetable here, we can go ahead and use another wavetable. There's so many amazing different wavetables we can add. I'll just choose this beating one here, and let's just solo that and see what this sounds like. So let's also raise this up by by a whole octave up, 12 semitones. And that adds some metallic texture to the sound. So we can detune this a little bit so that it will give even more of that chorusy effect as it plays along the first layer. Let's see what the two of them sound like together. I might need to mix down a little bit of oscillator 2, the metallic sound, so I can go over here and lower the volume a little bit. I'm just clicking the frequency filter, see if I want to open it. If I want it more brighter, we'll crank open the frequency. So that's cool. Now we want to add a little bit of movement to the actual tone itself, so it's not just so stiff. And movement could be added by using an LFO. So once again, going to the matrix here, I'm going to choose oscillator 1 and just click on the actual oscillator wavetable here, and that's going to give you oscillator 1 position, or you can go to the pitch here for oscillator 1 So I'm going to go ahead and choose LFO1 to alter the pitch of oscillator 1. So that might be way too much. Going back to LFO1, we can now set the amount way down, almost like barely there. And let's see if we can fix the rate, maybe every 16th. It's very subtle, but it adds just the right amount of movement to the actual tone to get it to where we need it to be. Next, I'm also going to add some filter drive as well to the second filter. I'm going to choose PRD and just give it a little bit of warmth and some drive there. And also to get that nice little gliss or glide from that one note to the next that we hear in the chorus, I'm going to make sure that I'm putting up the glide here. So we'll just go up a little bit. We'll just go right here and see what that does to the transition from this note here, the F, to the C. You get that nice glide there. So that's what the glide is going to be useful for. And now that I've got the set tone for this first layer with the two oscillators, we're going to start to implement some effect processing before I go to adding another layer to the synth. And the reason why is I want to do the best I can to shape the tone that I'm already using to get as close as possible. That way, I'm not trying to just stack layers and layers and layers for the sake of just doing it. I want to get as close as I can with some effect processing. And we're going to use an EQ and some reverb. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to my EQ8, click and drag that, take some of the low end off, and maybe boost some of that honkiness that I hear in the reference. Maybe as well as a little bit more of the high. And after that, I'm going to use a reverb to create some atmosphere and space. So let's go ahead and dial the reverb back. So it might be way too much space, so we can lower the decay time and really focus on that diffuse knob. This is going to lower the actual diffusion that's being taken place in the reverb. So now we can give a little bit more of that dry and wet and maybe just cut the high end off of that. And if I just crank the pre-delay, that'll just set the main tone in the front and have the reverb set a little bit farther. And we can open up. That's cool there. Next, I'm going to add some over-the-top compression. Usually that's the preset from the multi-band dynamics. I'm going to click the OTT preset here and drag that right after the reverb. Now, immediately we're just going to leave the 100% on, completely wet with this, and you're going to hear what it does drastically to the overall texture of the tone. So just thin it completely out. So let's just scale this back. And I'll play. So that over-the-top compression really helped the high mids just kind of get more present, and it just tucked the body or the bottom end just a little bit behind. So that's I like doing that before moving on to adding multiple layers, because then it just puts my headspace in a place where I'm like, okay, I don't have to do that much drastic addition to this because it's almost there. I'm just going to add another wavetable synth just to maybe just add some more body and some noise to the texture of the tone. So to layer this wavetable, I'm going to instantly create an instrument rack. So I'm going to click the wavetable that we've already created and edited. I'm going to right click and choose to group, and that's going to create an instrument rack in which we can see the first wavetable here. So let's just go ahead and rename that, and we'll put that layer 1. And then what we're going to simply do is just go ahead to the instrument folder, click Wavetable, and drag and drop that as our second layer. Now let's go ahead and solo that so we can focus our attention on what that layer is going to be doing. So I'm going to fix my attention over to the square waveform. I'm also going to do a little bit of the similar process. I'm going to switch from poly to mono. I'm going to put the glide maybe close to, let's match the same exact amount. So we'll go to layer 1, 45.8, and go over here and literally put that in, 45.8. And now I'm also going to shape the tone here. So I'm going to just short release, low sustain. And then we'll go ahead and use the filter frequency to take us some of the high end. As well as add some harmonic distortion. Now, before we did some modulating to the actual waveform, we went to modern. I'm going to stick with classic here, and I'm going to, you see the PW, that's the pulse width. So I'm going to actually adjust the width of this actual pulse. So let's see what we get here. So by adjusting the pulse width here, we're getting a whole nother different type of tone from that first square wave. And so I'm going to layer the second oscillator. Let me tell you the reason why I'm even starting with the square wave to begin with, because we're getting the bright openness from layer 1, and I'm using this one to get more of the body of the overall synth. I'm not necessarily needing to replicate more brightness. I just want some more of the body. And what I mean by body is just the overall, like maybe low mid to the mid range of that. And we're going to add some noise to the texture too. So I'm going to go to the second oscillator, put that on square as well, but we're going to detune this slightly. So let's just go over here and detune this. And we'll go to the first oscillator, and we're going to go 12 semitones up, a whole octave up. So we have one oscillator an octave up and one staying down an octave. And then what we can do is just go ahead and lower the mix of the regular sawtooth. And we're going to go back to the unison. And in this case, we're going to add noise to give us that white noise texture on top of it. Now let's see what that gives us with layer 1. This is without it. So you saw how when the layer 2 was brought back into the picture, it just became a lot more fuller. The body was brought back. Without layer 2, it just felt thin. And as you know, we still have the EQ and the reverb and the over-the-top compression affecting both layers. So that's a good thing, and that's why I like to do that before adding a layer, because I can hear what the second layer is going to sound like through that processing. Now that we've gotten this, let's go ahead and listen to what it sounds like with the drums in place. So now let's move over to the bass. I'm going to use the wavetable again, and in this instance, we're going to use, now, normally would gravitate towards a sine wave that because we're hearing that sub bass. So if I play the pattern, now I'm going to go from polyphonic to mono for the purpose of having those low notes not overlap one another. So I'll start with the sawtooth, the sine wave, sorry, so that we got that nice bottom end. But then maybe for the second layer, I might want to have something a little bit brighter, because when I listen to the reference, the bass does have this nice bright distortion to it. So I'll probably open that up with a sawtooth and mix and blend the two. So now let's go ahead and shorten the release, a little bit of the sustain as well. And let's use our filter frequency to just dial a little bit of the high end. All right, maybe just blend a little bit, lower that. And I can turn the sub oscillator on as well. Now what's cool is you can use the unison on this, the classic mode, to widen that up a little bit. Now right after that, I'm going to actually head over to some amp simulation. I'm going to get over to the amp plugin here in Ableton Live, and we're going to use this amp simulator. We're going to set it from mono to stereo, and I'm going to just dial this back, and this is going to add some more harmonic distortion on top and get some real nice grit and shine to it. So let's go through some of these different presets. Let's check out the lead. That's really nice and gritty, but let's just scale it back a little bit. And maybe even use a digital distortion right on top of that. So the Redux is a digital distortion that is native to Ableton Live. So that's pretty cool. And then I'm going to use a third-party plugin to add some movement, some side chaining. So I'm going to head over to my plugins. I'm going to use the Kickstart by Nicky Romeo. It's a consistent side chain plugin. And so that's just creating the pulse from a sidechain onto the bass. Let's see what that sounds like with everything together. So the amp simulator sitting on top of that sub bass makes it actually stand out a little bit more in the mix, but we're still capturing that bottom end. So I might want to use an EQ to just boost a little bit more of the bottom end after all that. So right after this, I'll go over here and use a shelf so that everything from this frequency on can be boosted a little bit. Cool. Now let's add the grand piano and we'll start to bring this to a close. So here we have the actual piano riff. And we have the basic grand piano preset with a couple tweaks here. I've got the bright set up high, some hardness, and that deals with the actual velocity. And we're using the over-the-top multi-band compressor here to really just help thin out and bring some of the high mids out. When I lower this all the way down, just feels a bit stale and more boxy. So when I crank this, the attributes that I like to have shine or be up more up front are the high mids, and that's what this is helping to do nicely. And I've got some more digital distortion placed right after that. So this is everybody together. Well, I hope this video has been encouraging, helpful, and inspiring in any way, shape, or form. And as my gift to you for watching this video, I'd love to send you that sample pack, including some of the sounds that you're hearing in this video. Simply click the link below in the description box to download this. This is yours absolutely free, and this works on any DAW, whether you're using Logic, Fruity Loops, your neighbor's washboard, it doesn't matter. So just simply click, drag and drop those files into your DAW. They're 100% royalty free, so that you can use them in your projects today and share that music that you're making with the rest of the world. So go ahead, download that, click the link below, or you can visit www.beatacademy.com/pack. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.